speaking of, I guess, other recent news, before I really start getting into the end of the podcast this week, I did want to go over a few news things that I saw. Nothing crazy. Um, and one of them was, well, I think recently in the news that there was the talk for the college credit, 10 grand, kind of being wiped from people's slates. I've heard that it's been canceled, but I haven't kept up on it enough to really know exactly what happened. So it's kind of interesting. I hope something like that goes through. I don't think college should completely necessarily be wiped from people's situations. I think it's just, in general, the prices and like, I don't understand why things keep going up like they do. Like, I guess I understand, but you feel like there should be like more of a cap on it in some way or another, considering what it's supposed to be meant for. And you have some colleges charging ridiculous amounts. I think the average student debt is, or federal student debt is, I think, about $35,000 roughly, throughout the country. Like, that's like the average, which is not good. Like, this one reason why I didn't want to go to college was I didn't want to rack up debt for something I didn't know I was going to use. And so it's, hopefully something gets figured out with it. I mean, it does suck because it puts people at such a young age in such a hard predicament, because it's like you could be 30, have a good job, and want to necessarily get like let's say a loan to buy a house. And it's like sometimes that's hard for you to even get, because you got to have a credit score, you got to have all this other information, history of like income and all this. But then when it comes to trying to go to school, you could go to a very expensive school without any work history, without any money, without any credit, and immediately get like $200,000 in loans or some crazy shit. And it's just the system with it's just kind of weird, and I feel like a little backwards at times. But I guess what was in the news this week besides that was mushrooms for alcoholism, which there has been studies done at other places, but it seems like more and more is happening. I mean, Oregon's basically has decriminalized a lot of stuff. It's being decriminalized in other states, but this is what's been in the news. A New York University study found that psilocybin, the psychedelic compound in magic mushrooms, paired with therapy may treat alcohol abuse. 93 alcoholic patients split into two groups. The first received 2 psychedelic trips, up to 12 therapy sessions, and the second received therapy and a placebo. Both groups reported 50% less heavy drinking after 4 therapy sessions. Those who took psilocybin drank an additional 40% less, up to 32 weeks after the first trip. Those who didn't begin to drink slightly more. And 2 times as many patients treated with psilocybin quit drinking than the members of the placebo group, which I think there's a lot to be had with psilocybin eventually. I think there can be a lot of uses for it, so I am curious to see what happens in like the next 5 to 10 years with it, in the sense of medical purposes and studies and just everything that it can be used for, where it's been shown to possibly have effects on PTSD and treatment with that. It's very interesting to see what happens. Not only that, oldest human ancestor possibly found. New findings suggest that the oldest human ancestor to walk on 2 feet did so 7 million years ago. The findings refer to a 7 million year old fossil that sparked a debate about whether or not being walked on 2 feet. New findings from its leg bones strengthened the argument that it did, therefore branched off from apes and is a human ancestor. The previous oldest ancestor is more than 1 million years younger than the newly discovered fossil. If this being did walk on 2 legs, it would imply that upright walking was among one of the first traits to distinguish humanoids from apes. It's pretty interesting. I thought I saw something like that earlier this week. Not even that post necessarily. There's a few other things that I've also seen. Okay, so synthetic mouse embryos created. I don't even know what the hell this would be used for exactly, but California Institute of Technology lab created a mouse embryo without a sperm or an egg. The researchers created a synthetic embryo by mixing sperm cells with two other cell types. At 8.5 days, several synthetic embryos were indistinguishable from normal ones. They develop a beating heart and a head. Researchers hope to use the process with human stem cells to explore why human pregnancies are lost early on and why 70% of in vitro fertilization attempts fail. Testing on real embryo raises a range of ethical considerations. Interesting. It's curious to see kind of where that goes, but synthetic embryos, that's weird. I mean, it's science is amazing, and it's just hard to ever see what exactly is in the near future with what we're going to be able to do. California is nearing a vote on a law that would ban the sale of gas-only cars in the state by 2035. I mean, I'm down for that, but they need to then also have clean energy production in the state. Otherwise, that's pointless, because you still might be using fossil fuel in the sense of how you're powering your vehicle. If you still use fossil fuel plants and you don't use nuclear, solar, or wind, it's still dirty energy, which it sucks. And I feel like that's one reason if I ever do buy an electric car, if I was going to power it, I would want to have solar panels on my home. So even if not all my electricity went into that, it made it a better situation. Okay, so the plan would be the most ambitious limit on car emissions in the U.S. It would set strict deadlines so that by 2035, all new cars must be zero emissions, with some plug-in hybrid exceptions. Cut that out. The ban would not apply to used or out-of-state cars. Officials say the plan will cut car emissions 50% by 2040. Cars currently emit 40% of California's emissions. California is the U.S.'s biggest buyer of cars. As such, the policy will shut the U.S. largest car market to gas-only cars, forcing car emissions to move to EVs. It makes sense, I guess, out of all states, considering like that in general. Like it's that considering they do buy a lot of cars, I guess I never realized that. It would make sense, but that's I would like to see where that ends up exactly. A famed jaguar known as El Jefe, or the Boss, was spotted for the first time since 2015. Jaguars, once common in the United States Southwest and northern Mexico, were nearly hunted to extinction. El Jefe is one of the few seen in the United States in the last 50 years. Many had feared him dead. In 2015, El Jefe was spotted in Arizona. This time, he was in Mexico, 100 miles south of the border. A motion sensor camera captured a photo in November, but it took months for the image to be uncovered. Jaguars are the world's third largest cat after tigers and lions, and the largest in the Americas. Well, that's kind of interesting. And chart of the day on this post from Ride the News. What does this say? 30% of all people live in China or India, or 35% of all people live in China or India. That makes sense. China and India each have more people than North America, South America, Australia, Africa, or Europe. They each have 1.4 billion people. The globe's population is 8 billion. As of 2020, China has a 0% population growth rate, while India is 0.68. Chinese official claim that the one-child policy, which lasted from 1980 to 2016 and limited families to one child, prevented 400 million births. Wow. Okay, so I don't think we should necessarily have a negative birth rate or a zero birth rate in the sense of like population growth. I feel like that's risky, because if it goes too far back and you start having less people, that's not necessarily good either. But that's interesting. Wow. Prevented 400 million births. That's ridiculous.